Could the Vancouver Canucks acquire former first overall pick Alexis Lafreniere? We're going to discuss the rumors linking the Canucks to the Rangers, plus we have all kinds of other updated rumors regarding Connor Hellebuyck, Noah Hanifin in Calgary, Scott Laughton in Philly is getting tons of attention, some other rumors regarding the Devils as well, plus the Vegas Golden Knights have taken a big 3-1 series lead in the Stanley Cup Final. All that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Before we jump into the rumors, I just want to quickly discuss and recap last night's NHL game between the Vegas Golden Knights and the Florida Panthers. It was Game 4 of the Stanley Cup Final. It was going to be a pivotal game. Either the Golden Knights were going up 3-1 or the Panthers were coming back to tie it up 2-2. It was a fairly closely contested game, but it didn't start off great with Vegas taking up a 3-0 lead fairly early into the game. You could tell as well Matthew Tkachuk still was not okay. We don't know exactly what he's dealing with because they won't come out and say, which is completely understandable this time of year. You don't really see teams doing that. They don't want anything to be targeted by the other team. We'll probably find out once the series is over and the Stanley Cup's been awarded. I don't know if it's more of a shoulder, like an AC joint type of injury. Some thought maybe a broken collarbone, but clearly he doesn't have a lot of strength in that arm and shoulder. Shooting is not really something you're seeing him try. More comfortable passing, but he's very just not himself. He's not playing physical. He's not really getting in there like he normally would be. So we'll have to see where things go. And the Panthers did get a couple of goals. They got a very lucky bounce one from Brandon Montour. They scored again later to make it 3-2 from Barkov in the third period. And they pushed at the end 6-on-5 to get it tied up, but they just could not get there. They even get a late power play with Alex Pietrangelo of the Golden Knights getting a puck over glass penalty late in the third period. But the Golden Knights held on for a 3-2 victory. Now, there's some people are saying as well, they're wondering if we might see a suspension involving Alex Pietrangelo. I'm not so sure that we're going to, but essentially what happened was, of course, Pietrangelo, as I just mentioned, had a late penalty for puck over glass. So technically, his penalty wasn't fully expired yet when regulation ended. But of course, when regulation ended, his penalty is over because the game is over. Obviously, he comes out of the box, the game's ended. That's not really a big deal. That's normal. However, at the end of the game, there was a bit of a skirmish in front of the net, which resulted in, there was no fights, but there was certainly some roughing going on and some, roughhousing, whatnot. But obviously, Pietrangelo, instead of going straight to the bench and off the ice, he did go down and he technically did get involved. And there was a little bit of a wrestling match with Tkachuk. Tkachuk had a stick wrapped around him. There really wasn't, the referee was kind of trying to break it up. It really wasn't much of anything. Now, the rule book does state that at the end of the game, that if that happens and the player goes from the penalty box into a situation like that, that there can be supplemental discipline. Now, I think they're more likely to look at that as if there was going to be a fight, because there was technically no fights. The only that were handed out for penalties, I believe they gave Tkachuk another misconduct penalty, so he's got a bunch of those in this series, and I think there's a couple of 2-minute penalties for roughing, all at the 20-minute mark, which really were not really relevant in any way, but they have to do that anyhow, just in case anything does lead to a suspension or other discipline issues. But I personally don't know that we're going to see that. It's at this point in the day, it's been quite a number of hours since the game's ended, and we have not seen any announcements from NHL player safety. I think that if they were going to be reviewing that for suspension, that we would have heard something by now, and we haven't. So I don't think we're going to see anything come from that. But at the end of the day, I didn't see it as a big deal. But I mean, the rules are the rules. That's the end of it, I guess. But some rules are certainly open for interpretation. So be curious to see if the NHL does put out any kind of statement or if there is anything more come from it. I know the Florida fans especially would like to see that. And the other thing I was disappointed in to see the Florida fans start to litter the ice at the end of the game. There's no need of that. I mean, I understand you're frustrated or upset your team lost, but don't be those types of people that litters the ice and acts immature because your team lost a hockey game. Yeah, it's frustrating. You want your team to win, but that is not what you do at all. Now, we'll stay with the Golden Knights for a moment. There was some talk last night from Elliotte Friedman during the intermission that the Vegas Golden Knights might be hosting next year's NHL draft. Of course, that's not officially confirmed as of yet. I would imagine we'll probably find out by the time this year's draft takes place. Usually around that time you find out where the next one's going to be. But the 2024 draft, there is interest from the Vegas Golden Knights to host. The NHL reportedly is interested in going there. Obviously, it's a situation where NHL staff and teams, they seem to love going to Vegas. It's a popular spot to go. So it won't be surprising one little bit if they do end up hosting the 2024 draft. So we'll have to wait and get confirmation on that front. But we have a bunch of other rumors to look at here today, which are going to likely lead to a number of trades. We did get word from a number of reporters that Jets goalie Connor Hellebuyck, who was rated at the top of the NHL trade bait board, and a player that's widely suspected could be dealt from the Jets. I think it's just that much more likely now that we know this is that he's going to be dealt, and that's the fact that he won't sign a contract extension. He's entering the final year of his deal, along with players like Blake Wheeler and Mark Scheifele in Winnipeg. Lots of talk that we're going to see big turnover there. Dubois, of course, is an RFA. We know he doesn't want to sign anything, and he wants out. So Dubois, I think, is going to be traded for sure. And now it sure sounds like Connor Hellebuyck will be. And I know they've said before that they didn't want to rebuild, that they were trying to get some, players back that would be immediate help, you could say, for Winnipeg and some of these deals that they're looking to make. I don't know. Without Connor Hellebuyck and a franchise goalie and no real clear answer on who could possibly take over, they may not have a choice but to rebuild. It's going to be very interesting to see how things go in Winnipeg. I know a Hellebuyck trade might lead to another goaltender coming back to the franchise who could take over as a starter, maybe. But I don't know that any team is going to be giving you a goaltender that's anywhere near that level of experience and quality. It's just not likely going to happen. I mean, Hellebuyck, to be honest, has been the absolute backbone of this team. The number of games that he himself has stolen for the Jets in the last few years alone and kind of willed them to the playoffs is pretty high. I think without Connor Hellebuyck, this team is going to be substantially worse. I mean, at the end of the day, they barely qualified for the playoffs, and there's a lot of other things going on, I think, within that dressing room and within this roster that needs to change to get things turned around. But you take that, big brick wall back there, like Connor Hellebuyck, who's been a, franchise goalie, that changes everything. So I do wonder if we'll see the Jets go more into a rebuild mode out of necessity more than anything. We'll see what happens, but certainly before we talked about the possibility of him being traded, now I think it's just a matter of where he goes. Cheveldayoff's not going to have a choice. They can't lose Hellebuyck for nothing. He's too valuable. I think of all the players are talking about trading, he just might get them the biggest return. In the case of Dubois, they don't have a lot of leverage, especially if he's going to try to force his way to Montreal, which is what many expect. They're not going to get as great of a return as that he's worth. It's just that simple. But on Hellebuyck, they could. And there's going to be a number of teams that are looking to shore up their goaltending that will be interested in this player. I think you're going to possibly end up in a bidding war. His contract's pretty good, too. So, at the end of the day, I think Hellebuyck is a goner in Winnipeg, as is Dubois, and of course, Wheeler and Scheifele, not a given, but pretty likely as well. Now, on to some other news today. We got some other news last night from Elliotte Friedman on the second intermission, talking with some other stuff we could see. And then we'll talk a little bit more about the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flyers and Danny Briere are a team that's going to be extremely busy. They've already kicked off trade season with the Ivan Provorov trade. All kinds of Carter Hart rumors floating around. We've heard more talk about Kevin Hayes being dealt. That dates back a while. But now a couple more names getting mentioned, and one in particular getting a ton of attention is Scott Laughton. Laughton was brought up by Friedman. Not so much saying that the Flyers are actively shopping him, looking to move him, just that they're getting a lot of interest. I mean, they do need to keep a few veteran players around to kind of be the vets to kind of lead the way here in this rebuild. And he could possibly turn out to be one of those guys. He's a good character player, well-respected, well-liked teammate, a hard-working player, certainly somebody who can lead by example. On a lot of teams is going to be a real good third-line player. And somebody who I think, if due to injury or whatnot, you can put him up in the top 6 on occasion as well. With some good players, I think he can bring out some more offensive skills. But he's got a good contract, 3 years at $3 million a year, so that part is good as well. But they were apparently getting some offers of a first-round pick, and the first-rounders that were being offered were in the second half, like later first-rounders, and so far they've rejected that. So it sounds like they have a fairly hefty price tag. They're going to either want a higher first-round pick or something else future-based that is going to give them something they feel is going to be a real good asset for the team moving forward. So, no, given that they move Laughton, but as Elliotte Friedman said, if they get the right price, they're certainly well open to making the deal. One team that has been linked to the Flyers and Laughton by Dave Pagnotta of fourthperiod.com is the Ottawa Senators. Of course, the Senators are, we'll see what happens with the ownership, because obviously they could change things, but right now their head coach, DJ Smith, is somebody who's quite familiar with Laughton. He coached Laughton in junior for a few years, and he also recently was an assistant coach with Team Canada at the World Championships, which Laughton was on that team as well. Scott Laughton even went as far as having a picture with DJ on ice that he posted to, I believe it was his Instagram, and went out of his way to make a social media post to comment about how much DJ Smith helped him in his young career and how much he liked and respected him and stuff like that. So clearly, I think that could be where the interest is coming from. It could be like a coach's recommendation to the GM. But if things go the way they are with Sens ownership, and it's looking more and more like Michael Andlauer could be the preferred bidder. Michael Andlauer is also the group here, or not that it's a big group, because it's not, but the most likely ownership scenario that we see the most change within the front office of the Senators. So it doesn't mean that everything's going to walk in there and clean house right away, but I don't know that we're going to see, or how quickly we'll see stuff happen, but I think there's a good chance we could have a whole different regime in place in Ottawa if he turns out to be the new owner in the not too distant future. So that could change the plans. We'll see what Pierre Dorion does in the meantime. Of course, we don't know how long this is going to drag out. Be curious to see how that affects things, though, because it's quite possible, to be honest, that we could get an announcement this week, in the next few days, regarding the Sens and Andlauer being the preferred bidder. I don't know, though, at that point, if he can really dictate any change until the sale is closed, and that's going to take some time. So I don't know how that's all going to work. They're going to have to work out an agreement and see, because obviously the Senators have a lot of decisions to make regarding their offseason plans, signings, trades, etc. And you kind of need to know what you're dealing with for a budget. You need to know who's running the ship, and there's a lot of questions to be answered there. So yes, the interest is real in Laughton amongst the existing regime, but I wonder if that's going to change in short order. Another name to watch in Philly, Travis Konecny, getting some interest as well. Again, another guy I'm not convinced that the Flyers absolutely want to trade. I think John Tortorella really likes Konecny, so I think they're quite open to keeping him around. But one team that's been mentioned as a potential suitor for him, and a team that many believe that he would re-up with on an extension, would be the Edmonton Oilers. So kind of watch for those two teams, Ottawa and Edmonton, to be sniffing around some of these Flyer players and see if we do get any additional deals. Now, with the Calgary Flames, Elliotte Friedman went on to say that Noah Hanifin is a defenseman to watch. He mentions as well that the Flames might be just as interesting to watch as the Jets. That comment kind of surprised me a little bit, because we knew at the end of the season there was a lot of Flames players, the way they have their contracts and cap structure, they have a ton of players that are entering the final year of their deal, or UFA now. So there's a lot of expiring deals here on the books coming up, and many of which we knew were unlikely to want to come back. There was a lot of unhappy players at the end of the year that did not like playing for Daryl Sutter. They did not like how everything went. They didn't seem to like the direction of the team. And then, of course, Brad Treliving leaves and left things kind of, uncertain. And then Sutter gets fired after by ownership. I mean, like, that really was kind of an odd scenario. But at the same time, a lot of people were led to believe after the reports were that now that Sutter's gone, a lot of players feel better about returning. They're more interested and open to re-signing, extending, etc. But the way Friedman's talking now, I wonder if things have not gone well in that regard, and maybe a lot of these players on the final years might look to move after all. He mentions Hanifin's getting a lot of attention. Doesn't mean for sure he goes, but he's got 1 year left on his deal. He's been a good top 4 puck-moving defenseman. Regardless of what happens in Calgary, I wouldn't be shocked if they traded a D-man. They do have a very deep D-core, and they can afford to move somebody, especially if they're looking at everything saying, well, we're probably not going to be able to extend everyone. And if Hanifin's getting a ton of interest and the return is right, maybe it makes sense to look at moving him. So we'll see. I mean, I know the Bruins have been linked to Hanifin forever and a day. Not to say that they're necessarily going to go after him right now. But of course, they've had their eye on him since he was, before he was drafted. I mean, it's somebody that I always expected eventually would end up there, but we will see. He's a good skating, puck-moving defenseman. So look for Noah Hanifin to likely get enough interest to move on from the Flames. It'll be interesting to see if Elias Lindholm or Michael Backlund or any of the other guys here make the jump as well. But the comment saying that they're going to be just as interesting to watch as the Jets makes me think that there's multiple players there that the Flames may not bring back. So we'll see how much change we see in Calgary. Of course, the Devils already made a big splash by trading Devin Severson on a sign-in trade. We could see a couple more players, including the rights to Ryan Graves or Miles Wood, be traded. Wood's another player to watch. I'm not completely certain or sold on the idea that he's going to be back in New Jersey. I really think they're likely going to move on from him. Not necessarily scenarios for Graves or Wood that we're going to see sign-in trades, because I don't know that either player is going to get an 8-year deal. But I wouldn't be surprised in the least if we see their rights traded ahead of time if they can recoup a draft pick in order for letting another team have exclusive negotiating window ahead of free agency opening. Now, as I mentioned as well, could the Canucks end up acquiring Alexis Lafreniere? Now, there's been on-again, off-again rumors about this regard. There's a lot of people think that there's a possibility that the Rangers could trade the former first overall pick. Of course, he's coming to the end of his entry-level deal. He's a restricted free agent, needs a new contract, and the Rangers are in a pretty tight, tough cap situation. They have some tough decisions to make, like a lot of teams. But the other thing with Lafreniere is he hasn't really, really lived up to the number 1 overall hype as of yet. Now, that doesn't mean that he won't, and it doesn't mean they should give up on him. That's not what we're saying at all. But his former agent is Emily Castonguay, who is the assistant GM now in Vancouver. So it certainly makes sense that she would be, pushing for the Canucks to look into acquiring him if he's available, of course. Arthur Staple wrote about it again, which is why it's come up. I mean, before it's been mentioned by other reporters, but new information from Arthur Staple popped up in The Athletic here just in the past couple of days talking about this again, suggesting a player like Connor Garland might be of interest to the Rangers, saying how he's, fairly productive, sneaky, hard to play against. I don't know that would be a one-for-one trade. I don't think it would be. If the Canucks could trade Garland straight up for Lafreniere, I think they're going to do that all day long. I'm not convinced Chris Drury is that bad of a GM to make that kind of trade, though, to be honest. Would I can see the Rangers trading for Garland? Maybe. I don't know that the return strictly is just going to be Lafreniere. I think there'd have to be other pieces involved here for sure. But that seems to be the latest on that front, is that the Canucks are still interested. Obviously, like I said, the connection to his former agent makes a ton of sense. I think a lot of teams would like to see if they can help Lafreniere achieve his full potential. But can you imagine how that would look on the Rangers if he goes to somewhere else and suddenly becomes a consistent top 6 forward and starts putting up, at least 60, 70, 80 points this year? That would be something that they would come back to bite them hard. So they're going to want to be careful with this for sure. Same goes for Capo Caco. I'm not entirely convinced that one of them doesn't get dealt, but they're going to have to be extremely cautious with what kind of return they get on this. I mean, certainly they're going to have some creative cap things to think about and figure out to get everybody re-signed. It's not going to be easy to do, but I don't know. I mean, Garland doesn't exactly come with a cheap contract either. There's more money than Lafreniere, so you can't sell the idea of selling Lafreniere because of cap and then take it on Garland, right? So there have to be other things at play here. But again, we'll see. The Canucks' persistence of this player seems to be there, and it's not going away. So we'll see if they push hard enough to eventually get Chris Drury to seriously listen and see if they can't push this for something a little bit more realistic. You'd think that the Rangers would be pushing back looking for a player like a Podkolzin or another younger player that would be more interesting to them. Maybe their first-round pick this year. We'll see where that goes. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.